File this one under do as I say, not as I do. An investigation by Channel 4 in Nashville, Tennessee, revealed the police found marijuana in the home of a woman named Danielle Elks. Mrs. Elks is the director of the state's Alcoholic Beverage Commission, known as the ABC, whose mission is to eradicate marijuana in the state of Tennessee. Police only discovered the drugs because they found the front door to her home open and suspected a burglary, so they just walked in. Normally, if the cops find drugs in someone's home, that person will be charged and likely prosecuted, but not Mrs. Elks. Channel 4 spoke with an ABC employee who told the news station that if drugs were found in an average citizen's home, even under terrible circumstances like this where the door was open, it would still be investigated. Danielle Elks got a pass, apparently, because she's a high-ranking government official. But we should all get the pass. The Constitution simply does not allow the police to search your home without probable cause, even if the front door is open, period. And we all have the natural right to put into our bodies whatever we want, period. The war on drugs ensnared a 45-year-old Mississippi grandmother who now faces a year in jail for, are you ready for this? Purchasing a $9 box of Sudafed and bringing it across state lines. Mrs. Diane Avera purchased the nasal decongestant in Demopolis, Alabama. She says it was for a scuba diving expedition in Panama City. Sudafed helps with ear trouble while scuba diving. It is also a common ingredient used in the manufacture of illegal methamphetamine, which is why Mississippi requires a prescription for this common decongestant. The clerk at her local Walmart told her to go to Alabama, where cough medicine is legal to purchase over the counter. Unfortunately for Mrs. Avera, police were conducting a sting in Demopolis, Alabama, and Mrs. Avera was arrested by a police officer outside the Walmart where she purchased the perfectly lawful Sudafed. The director of the Mississippi Bureau of Narcotics, Marshall Fisher, said about the anti-decongestant laws in his own state, quote, "We have enough to say grace over without doing that silliness. The last thing we want to be responsible for is targeting grandma." Yet Mrs. Avery, a grandmother who has never run afoul of the law, is now facing a year in jail. This is more than silliness. 16 states currently allow pot for medicinal uses, and now it looks like marijuana for recreational use could be right around the corner. The state of Washington may vote to allow pot to be regulated similarly to alcohol, so the sale of pot would be restricted to the 21 and over crowd. Colorado could legalize pot to the point where it's treated like, quote, grapes, tomatoes, or other harmless botanical plants. Is all this moving too fast, or is the time right? Ethan Nadelman, good friend of the show from the Drug Policy Alliance, joins us now. Ethan, it's a pleasure. Welcome back to Freedom Watch.
Thanks for having me on, Judge.
So tell me how this would work in California. How would marijuana be regulated like wine?
Well, the basic idea is to say to the legislature, you guys come up with the rules and regulations, but basically aim for a model like wine. Now, obviously, when it comes to production, a lot of people like the idea of marijuana being grown, like to say wine is produced in vineyards,
right,
rather than having a kind of Budweiser model. On the other hand, when it comes to the retail sale and when it comes especially to use, probably the rules that are going to apply are more like the smoking rules. There's going to be bans on smoking in public, bans on smoking in bars and all sorts of other places like that. So it'll be something like a wine model. But look, Washington State's a little like an alcohol model. Colorado, which is going to be on the ballot, is going to be something like an alcohol model.
Right.
So people are aiming for that basic idea.
All right, Ethan, what about the 800-pound gorilla, which is the federal government? Because marijuana, the feds claim, is still against federal law, and they claim that they can selectively prosecute distributors and users. How do you get around that?
Well, it's going to be very tough, Judge. It's a lot like the repeal of alcohol prohibition. When Congress finally, repealed the Volstead Act and we passed the 21st Amendment in 1933 repealing alcohol prohibition, it didn't start at the federal level. It started with the states beginning to repeal their own state prohibition laws. So the only way we're going to see marijuana get legally regulated around the country is for the states to take the lead, create those conflicts with the feds, push them back. What we've been very careful to do in drafting these initiatives is to try to protect medical marijuana so that if marijuana gets legalized for everybody and the feds come flying in and try to block it, at least the medical marijuana portion will be preserved.
All right. Is this in any way going to be impacted by the presidential race? Because I do know of one Republican seeking his party's nomination who openly and notoriously says what you put into your own body is none of the government's business.
You know, the only impact, look, Obama's not going to talk about this. And if the Republican candidate is Romney or any of the other leaders right now, they're not talking about this as well, except to say that they're against it. Because even though 50% of Americans now say they support legalizing marijuana use, first time we've ever seen a majority, the presidential candidates still see this as the third wheel of American politics. On the other hand, what we may well see is that the Libertarian candidate, whether that's Gary Johnson, the former governor of New Mexico, who sort of got pushed out of the Republican primaries, or whether it's Ron Paul, I think running independently in some way, I think you're going to see more young people showing up at the polls and more people voting for the Libertarian line than ever before.